So there's a new White Dwarf supplement out and about, and it seems that there's some new rules available for the shadowy Eldar of Altansar. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, the strategy-focused 40k channel, where today we're talking new Eldar rules of a different flavour, a mini codex supplement that has cropped up in the February White Dwarf that seems to be designed and played with the new Eldari codex, and seems to be a mini expansion from one of the quite cool mini craft worlds in the lore. I don't think that there's anything that looks particularly game-breaking here, but a few really quite fluffy or interesting rules could be good for a craft world army of a different flavour. And to be fair, I think compared with the main ones, these guys will probably have more options, as they'll have more warlord traits, relics and stratagems that are unique to them. I think there are positives and negatives though to actually releasing this as a White Dwarf supplement, as opposed to being actually printed in a full book. It does mean that it's really quite cheap to get hold of, rather than buying an entire £30 plus Warzone book. It'll be relatively inexpensive to get your hands on a few new rules, though once the White Dwarf has been and gone, it's going to be a lot harder to track down the rules if you want them. I guess you'd be looking on second-hand sites like eBay, or have to reference things like screenshots or Warhapedia. In any case, Altansar I think is one of the more interesting Craftworld backstories, a Craftworld that survived the fall and wasn't so close to the epicenter of Slaanesh's birth that they were just destroyed outright, but were unable to escape the gravity well of the Eye of Terror, and were thought to have perished in the warp. The only survivor of the Altansar Craftworld was Morgan-Ra, the Phoenix Lord of the Dark Reapers, who established many other shrines on other Craftworlds. It wasn't until millennia later, in the 41st millennium, that the Phoenix Lord, accompanied by some Dark Reapers and the Black Guardians of Ulthwé, and were able to mount an expedition to discover the fate of the Craftworld in the temporary calm in the warp storms that allowed Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade to pass. The Strike Force was able to reach the Craftworld, repulse the demonic invaders that had assailed it for millennia, and deliver the Altansar Craftworld back to real space. Far from being a moment of celebration amongst the other Craftworlds, though, the Eldar of Altansar were much mistrusted. Few believed that they could have survived that long in the warp and not been irrevocably corrupted by chaos. A really fun little backstory, and now Games Workshop have released some rules to represent them in-game, should you wish to. If we take a look at the rules for this Craftworld then, their Craftworld attribute is Grim Survivors, as they're heavily militarized and have a penchant for close quarters combat. I must admit though, as rules go, it's not particularly strong. On the first round of melee you get an extra pip of AP, so if you charged, were charged, or made a heroic intervention, that bit's maybe not too bad, particularly paired with lower AP units, maybe things like Striking Scorpions, now they look a bit stronger. But the second half of their trait is a bit underwhelming, just simply adding 1 to combat attrition tests, basically just a few less of them will run, fairly meaningless in the scheme of things. I believe that these are 2 of the custom Craftworld traits from the Codex Eldari once it drops, much in the same way that some of the Space Marine White Dwarf chapters basically just took 2 successor chapter traits and then combined them together. To be honest, for Altansar, it seems that they've combined one of the moderately good ones with a really bad one, so at least in terms of strength, the only thing that's really going to sell them are things like Warlord traits, relics and stratagems. Speaking of which, they have 3 Warlord traits to choose from, the first one being Master of Rune Warding. It allows you to deny 1 extra psychic power and also re-roll Deny the Witch tests. That's actually genuinely decent psychic defense if you put that on a Farseer. Obviously not useful against every single army, but with things like Grey Knights and Thousand Suns in the meta, it doesn't seem too bad to throw on 1 HQ choice if you do have one that doesn't have something better from the new codex. Next up, Beacon of Light in the Darkness means that 1 unit within 9 inches in the command phase can then do actions while shooting, and do actions if they advanced or fell back. Maybe it could be handy enough if you've got a really specific plan as to how 1 unit's going to win you the game, but certainly not one of the stronger ones situationally. A bit sad that being a command phase thing, you aren't able to use this on deep strike infantry, meaning that you could both have a deep strike squad that can also do an action. If you could do that, it'd be significantly better. Finally, we have an actual decent damage dealing one called Weaver of the Bladestorm. This one's a command ability that selects a core unit with shuriken weapons, and it basically gives them 6s to hit auto wound. I guess in theory that could be really quite good on something like Dire Avengers. We reviewed a datasheet for them a couple of weeks ago. It looks like their shooting's going to be 3 shots now and AP -2, so a big unit of them combined with this could actually be pretty lethal. 30 shots on average means 5 auto wounds straight away, and all at a very nice AP -2. That one seems okay if you've got a buffing character and you're actually going to be using some shuriken weapons for damage dealing. Moving on, there's just the 2 relics. The first one in the Saviour Stone is really quite interesting. This one applies to that new Strands of Fate mechanic, where you roll a certain number of d6, and then depending on what roll you get, you can sub them in for certain rolls in-game, say things like charge rolls or saves. This one basically allows you to manipulate one of the dice that you've rolled, either increasing or decreasing one of the dice by 1 point, probably trying to get something more useful, say something like a boosted charge roll or saving throw. Certainly makes the mechanic a little bit stronger. I would bear in mind that you're only altering one dice like this though. The other relic is called the Emblem of the Broken Chain, apparently part of one of their temples that fell down. This one's another command phase buff, where you select one core unit, and it can reroll advance and charge rolls. For me, it sounds like Howling Banshees could be the perfect target of that. They get to both advance and charge in the same turn, so that's quite likely to add up to an extra 2 or 3 inches of threat range, which could be really crucial if you're trying to get them massively across the battlefield. Seems good if you're choosing to use a big unit of them, a bit more underwhelming if not. Finally, we've got a section of 4 different stratagems. The first one for 2 CP is Inexhaustible Hatred. Seems to be representing the fact that they really dislike demons after being stuck in the Eye of Terror with them so long. For 2 CP you get +1 to wound against demons in melee, but sadly it doesn't work against monsters or vehicles, which will be the targets that it'd be really relevant against. Still could be useful if you're fighting a really tough demon unit or character, but obviously very niche to the army that you're fighting, and 2 CP isn't exactly cheap either. For 2 CP we have Defiant to the Last. This one does seem like a bit of a power play to be honest. It means that at the start of your command phase, you can grant Obsec to any one Altansar unit, and it doesn't matter whether it's a character, vehicle or anything else, it can be literally anything that you choose. For 2 CP this one actually could be really quite good. It means that if the objective secured rule is going to make the difference between you taking a primary objective or not, then it means that you can have it that single turn, as you use this at the start of your command phase and objectives are scored at the end. I think perhaps out of all the tricks that the Altansar have to offer, this one might be one of the most powerful. It basically gives you the opportunity to trade 2 CP for 5 victory points if swinging that primary objective with objective secured is going to be worth it. Next up, for 1 or 2 CP, we have Withering Volleys. This one's a missile launcher one and references their Dark Reaper heritage from Morgan Ra. When you're firing with a unit, Eldari missile launchers and Reaper launchers get extra AP -1 better, usually going to be going to AP -3 over AP -2. It costs 2 CP if you're applying it to Dark Reapers, or 1 CP if you're using it for any other unit. Again, an extra pip of AP is nice and everything, but I feel like you're unlikely to get enough shots to actually make this count. I guess if War Walkers with missile launchers could be a thing, they might have enough firepower to make it worth it, and maybe Dark Reapers might have enough shots to make it worth it against certain targets, but at 2 CP it's a far worse deal. I guess could incentivize you to take that squadron of War Walkers though, if their turn out to be good. Finally, for 1 CP is a bit of psychic damage defense called Thrice Layered Wards. This one gives you a 4+ saving throw against mortal wounds inflicted in the psychic phase. So if you've got a unit that's going to be absolutely hosed by a whole bunch of psychic from Grey Knights or Thousand Sons, then I guess you could apply that to them to keep them safe. Going to be very worth it against those armies quite a lot I think, but again like the demon thing, very matchup specific. Overall, out of the Altansar rules, I think they're unlikely to be one of the more competitive picks just due to that subpar Craftworld attribute. I quite like the boosted Psychic Denial and the Shuriken buff on the Warlord traits. Both the relics look usable, maybe the emblem more for Howling Banshees, and the pop-up Obsec and Psychic Defense both look like they could be interesting things on the stratagem side. Maybe in the hands of an expert Eldar player with the Obsec thing, that could be enough to make them tempting, but I feel that would be a bit more of a quirky pick, and I feel like the Eldar are almost certain to have better Craftworlds to choose from when the codex drops. Still though, I think it's a fun little expansion to the rules, adds a bit more flavour, and is genuinely a case of Games Workshop offering some decent rules support for a mini-faction that isn't actually a Space Marine chapter for once. It's nice to see them branching out a little bit further with these White Dwarf expansions. In any case, let me know what you think. What do you make of these new rules for this resurgent Craftworld? If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly be keeping up with the Eldar Codex rumours and review the Codex in full once it's out. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I'd just like to mention the Auspex Tactics Patreon page, which is what allows me to keep on making these videos so regularly by giving me the time that I need to focus on them. If you are enjoying a lot, any support is enormously appreciated, keeping them coming. I do try and give channel patrons some decent rewards, including seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.